After Catherine Halsey had been marked as a traitor by the Earth government, she was forced into hiding. She knew that the Earth government would have put the military services the best trackers to find her and execute her for her treason. So she was literally had to find somewhere to be hiding where she can probably live out her life. But it was just only one problem. Even there are many colonies throughout the galaxy, but there are many of those who do have very much military presence. So she would not be even dare enough to even go any near of a major Earth human colonies. Because if there are bigger colonies, there's a big risk they could have been having either a small or even significant size of a military presence. And if she would be spotted, she would immediately be tracked and captured and executed. So that was something that she knew. She would even dare to even go any near those major colonies. But even though she knew about at least a handful of smaller colonies that basically lacked of any military presence, but still she knew there was always a risk to go to any of those colonies, even if the smaller farming colonies, which you sometimes could have a population from a few thousand to maybe as a few hundred. But even so, she wouldn't even want to dare herself her own life to go to any of those human colonies. But she found a small habitable moon where she decided to build her own home, even though she were on temporarily staying there or not. But she has always put some traps in the system, like hidden bombs, that would immediately alert her if anyone has ever entered this particular system. And she lived there for almost a few months. Even in the beginning, she was very scared, feared that she would be easily be tracked. But after nearly 3 months, she had actually have feeling calm, but she was always on high alert because she had always had a small tablet or something on her arm that showed any presence of any ships, even if it was a civilian or even a military presence. But after living on this small moon for about at least 6 months, she was found. Earth government's military had sent their best tracker team, 5-star Osiris. They had finally tracked her down after 6 months. But luckily though, she had been keeping her ship well hidden for most part, and always had maintained the systems so make sure it wouldn't be easily been needed those repairs or something. But only one slight problem. Her ship that even didn't possess any much bigger weapons, only as light armed. Her ship was light armed. So even though she were in a battle, she wouldn't even get much of a big fight. So she had even only to have modified her ship's shields, so they would at least give her enough time to manage to escape or something. But after she had discovered some of her bombs had been triggered, she knew it was the Earth military in system. So she didn't hesitate. She went quickly to her ship and left. She was easily tracked by the 5-star Cyrus, who actually saw her. But they fired upon the ship even though the shields were holding. But she knew it was only a matter of time because their ship's weapons were even way stronger than her own. As she was putting in coordinates on her ship's slip space generator, but as the ship was about to enter, it was hit by one of those the 5-star Osiris ship's weapons. Her shields were temporarily shut down, and even though she managed to jump in slip space, it only lasted for like only 15 seconds. And as the ship left it, she had no idea idea because she knew that there was that 15 seconds would even be enough time for her to have left that system alone, or even been even near the destination that what she was going to. But at least, according to her system or sensors, there were no other ships in the vicinity. But it was only a big planet approaching, a giant gas giant. But but as she was approaching, the ship's alarm was going off. She had no idea what was happening, but only said engine damage repeatedly. And she wasn't even aware how serious the damage were, but that was not the problem. She had to find somewhere to land, because if she doesn't, the problem could explode, and that would make the end of her permanently. So she scanned the system around the gas giant to find if there was any habitable moons in the vicinity that she can use as temporary landing site. Luckily though, she found at least one habitable moon. But she was going down for it. But as she was getting in the atmosphere of this habitable moon, it was very hard for her because she couldn't even. She was worried that this turbulence would disrupt her ship, and rip it apart. But she was at least happy that that didn't happen. But she was forced to find any good spot to land, even safely or if it was necessary to crash land, even was necessary. But she was flying quickly over some areas. But as she was flying, the ship's report of the damage was reporting to be even so severe, and she was forced to crash land. And what she did in a dense jungle. A few hours later, she woke up in her own ship, and she was a daze. She had no idea what, no recollection of what happened. But then, after a few minutes, she remembered. She walked up from the chair, walked around, and even looked out the window, and saw that she was in this dense jungle. And she went back to the computer to see what the damage was. The damage was, well, the ship. She needed to have the ship to analyze the damage just to make sure. And after a few minutes, the ship had made its full report, showing that the main ancient drive to sleep space and its satellite was damaged beyond repair. Communication, weapons, shields, all damaged. But at least she was safe. But she was in an unknown territory. Because when she checked in the computer's database of this location, it didn't match any of the database at all. So she was a bit worried. She was on this unknown moon in an unknown system, but it also gave her a sense of relief because if she was in a one unknown star system in a galaxy, it would give her at least some self relief because if this five-star Cyrus was still looking for her, they would even know where she ended up because the galaxy is huge. There are billions of stars. She could have gone anywhere. So after she had having examined the ship's damage, she realized that now without the ship, she was stuck there. Unless this moon had any some sort of spaceport or even a colony somewhere. Because Catherine wasn't even sure if this moon even had any activity or any intelligent life form or anything. Because for the first 2 days of looking around an area, she didn't find any sign of any intelligent life forms anywhere, even though she didn't walk far, only for less than a mile away from the ship. She was actually very much defenseless. She didn't even have any weapons with her, And there was another issue that she had to be facing, and that would be starvation. She only had a few days of rations, and even though she did had half of that, it could only last maybe less than a week. But water itself wouldn't be much a problem because she found a small creek near the ship, and it she tested it and it was actually clean, but she needed to purify it a little bit more. But other than that, food supplies was going to be very strange because she didn't know if any of the plants on this moon was even safe or poisonous. So, and after nearly those 2 days on the ship, she decided it was time to leave. So she packed the only foods that she had and the medical supplies that she did had and left the ship. First of all, she didn't know where to go, but after choosing one direction, after she walked several miles through this dense, unknown jungle, she did notice there were some birds and other small creatures on the floor, on the ground, like lizards and other small spiders or anything. But so far, no signs of any habitation about any higher developed life forms, like humans or tell other aliens for artifacts. But after she nearly had walked for just one day, she made a small camp and was wondering herself, will I ever find any help? Or will I even survive? But on the next second day, she walked around and then suddenly she heard this strange sound, like a beeping sound. But not this constant beeping as she was familiar with. And then around the corner she saw this strange mechanical robot or it looks like a mechanical life form. But she wasn't sure if this was an hostile or if it was even human. But even if this was a human robot, this design of it was not something that she was even familiar with. But what else she did have to lose? She only a few days more left of rations. So she walked up to this strange robot and tried to communicate with it. But even this robot couldn't even understand, or if it's even was capable of even understanding human speech, she wondered herself. But this robot actually wasn't attacking her. It's like it was curious. But as it turned around and just rolled away, she actually decided why not to follow it. Maybe that it could actually lead her to some help, or maybe some settlement somewhere. Even though it meant there could have been a human presence, or maybe an alien, but what had she had to lose? Even if it meant that she could be killed or executed. After maybe 2 miles of walking, she came to this, saw in the distance this huge structure, like a stone structure, like a giant temple of some sort. And then she noticed there were a group of people, humans and non humans, talking. But some of them were actually using, it looks like a sword made of a laser. This is one technology has never even heard of, or even thought was even possible. But one of the humans, an elder, an adult, walked up to to her and started talking. But when he was talking, it was a language she had never understood. Maybe this was a moon that contained a small colony that's a language that's been developing to insulate it or something, she thought. But she tried to communicate with her own language. But despite this, the language barrier made it very hard to communicate. Even when this gold plated robot, humanoid like, tried to communicate with her with different languages, or at least trying to understand her language, but it was no point. But She was then taken to this inside and to a place it looks like some sort of a missile or something. She was offered food and some water, and this people around her is just curious looking at her. And they also wondered, where did she come from? Like, this moon wasn't even having any other major settlement. And after that, she was shown to a small room, but astonished enough, it was even when the left people left, she was expecting they would lock the door, but they didn't. And after a few hours, she left the room, and the door wasn't even locked, and she wasn't even stopped when she tried to leave. So was she assuming maybe these people wasn't aware who she is, but she decided to stay there at least for the time being. For at least now she had a shelter, food, water, and hopefully that she might be able to find a way to communicate with these people and maybe to find a ship so that she can leave this place. That didn't take long though, because despite the language barrier in the beginning, it took her nearly just 1 week to understand the language. Turns out, the language they were speaking was actually a galactic standard language. That was something that she had never heard of. But then she realized, after this leader, the man she met at the beginning, named Luke Skywalker, told her about this galaxy and some of the species that she encountered, then she realized she wasn't even in her own galaxy anymore. That may be the reason why Firestar Cyrus never found her. But then how is that even possible? Slip space are not even capable of traveling between two galaxies. But after doing some experiment to examine this information that she'd been found, what if she didn't end up in traveling to a galaxy in her own universe? What was she end up in this ultimate universe, or like an ultimate dimension, but in a different galaxy? There was still a population of humans, but among many, many different species. After a while, she started to learn more of this lightsaber, so they later find out what's called this laser sword. And the power for those people was called force sensitive. And even this small robot, which she later found out was called a droid, was named RTD2. He actually was very fond of Catherine, and he actually spent a lot of time around her. It took a little bit of time to get understand this binary coding system or language that he was speaking, and they actually became good friends. And even though in the beginning that her original plan was to find a ship and leave, but now to knowing that she was in a whole different galaxy, in an ultimate dimension, there was no reason for her to just keep on the run. But when some of the students of the Jedi's, which she also find out was called, they asked her where she was from, or at least what planet, and but she didn't even talk much about her past. And they understood because they didn't force her to do anything that she didn't want to. Even though she wished that she herself could have been a Jedi, so Luke did some tests on her, but unfortunately she couldn't do it because she didn't have what was required to be a Jedi. But he said that even though she couldn't be a Jedi, but she can always help them to serve the Order by being a scientist. And that's something that she wanted to do. And in fact, she decided to offer her scientific research that she has, the knowledge, especially when she told them about her ship and this kind of one of a kind engine. They were actually very skeptical about it. But after she showed them the ship, and after they scanned the engine, and they actually somehow managed to do some reverse engineered a smaller model of the same hyperdrive, or this a slip space generator. even though it turns out to be a little bit slower compared to a hyperdrive, but it was a very much effective thing. And this technology was a brand new. And in the beginning, they tried to incorporate this type of engine in their own ships. But the same design that she had on her ship would even work. But like I said, they did a reverse engineer of this slipspace generator and the engine itself. And they built at least three prototypes of three different types of ships. And each one was unmanned, but they worked. So this slipspace engine became very popular type of design ships for the Jedi. They actually named her like the scientist of the year, or but even her staying in this temple, she was very grateful because these people, despite knowing her, not unknowing her past, they had accepted her, welcomed her in as one of their own. Especially one of the people there, well, one of these non-biological people, R2D2, had accepted her as a friend. But during one bad lightning storm, R2D2 was outside with some of these students to try to get them inside. But as he was doing that, the lightning struck him, and Luke was there terrified. This lightning couldn't have fried his memory banks and other things about him. And even there were a lot of very technical, skilled engineers and all that, they tried to work on it, but they gave him the same answer. There was nothing they could do for him. He was done. And Luke took it very seriously hard because since R2D2 had been with him for years. But when Catherine found out about this, she could not take a no from the other engineers who stated to her that despite they tried, there was nothing they could do for him. But she took that as a challenge. So she took R2D2 to her own personal chamber and asked for any spare parts or droid parts of the same model as he was built of, and even tools and other power packs and all that stuff. Despite the other engineers, they said that there was no way to win that he would repair it. But from the several days in her own chamber, people can actually hearing a lot of working, bangings, laser stuff and all that from there. And they also heard her talking to herself like, come on, why did it want to work? But they were expecting that she would give up. But one day, after nearly like 5 days, it was silent. Then, as Luke was standing with some of the students training them outside this big temple, he heard Catherine's voice behind him. She was like, Luke, I have something for you. And he turned around and saw R2D2 active. He was dumbfounded. Despite other the experts of the scientists and other engineers who worked on him, they couldn't make it work. And he was like, how did you even make it happen? She explained how she did it, and he was grateful. She explained to Luke that all she needed was to replace some of the damaged parts and some other things. And even after all this, R2D2 remained as her best friend. And in fact, he was very grateful. Not only that, his memory banks wasn't actually affected at all by the lightning. But after he found out what she did, he actually very much told her how he felt such respect and even gratitude. And for that moment, R2D2 spent a lot of time to helping Catherine when she was working on ships or even other technology or other equipment that they need help with. But still, despite this, R2D2 one day said to Catherine that after what she did for him, he actually saw her as his true friend. And she said the same thing because he had helped her so much, and both was just happy. And this is how R2D2 and Catherine Halsey became a true friend. The end.